Taking something as beloved and frankly as weird as One Piece and turning it into a live-action show, well, that's one of the biggest gambles in entertainment. We're talking about a story that's been going for over 25 years. But the real challenge? It wasn't just about the plot. It was about taking the completely impossible, gravity-defying look of that world and somehow, some way, making it real. And this quote from costume designer Diana Cilliers, it just says it all, doesn't it? These characters weren't made for the real world. So how in the world do you take drawings, these incredible pieces of 2D art, and put them on real actors, in a real physical space? That was the question on every fan's mind. It was the question that kept the creators up at night. So to even have a shot at succeeding, the team had to start by facing this problem head on. They had to deal with a massive clash between the manga and the reality of making a movie. You could almost call it a battle between pure, boundless imagination and, the laws of physics.
And this really breaks it down, right? In the manga, a character's hair can defy gravity and they can wear the exact same outfit for like 100 chapters without so much as a rip or a smudge. But in our world, actors have to move, they have to do stunts, they have to film in the freezing cold, and they need to hide these big, bulky action harnesses under their clothes. A drawing just doesn't have to deal with any of that.
And the fans? They knew this was the make or break challenge. This comment from Javier Patag just nails the feeling. The audience knew that if you just copied things one for one from the page, it could end up looking, kind of silly. The pressure to get this right was absolutely immense. So how did they tackle something so impossible? Well, not with shortcuts, that's for sure. They did it with an incredible philosophy of deep respect for the source material. They made the decision to dig into every single piece of art Ichiro Oda had ever made to find their answers. And their dedication here was just unbelievable. They didn't just look at the main story. They went deep into Oda's color walks, these gorgeous, full-color art books. They poured over every chapter cover, every piece of standalone art where characters might be wearing something totally unique. And the ultimate cheat code? They had a direct line to Oda himself. If they had a question, they could just ask the guy who created it all. And really, when you boil it all down, everything they did was driven by one thing. They wanted to honor that deep, personal connection that fans have with these characters. It was never just about making a costume look like a picture. It was about capturing a feeling, that feeling of familiarity and love that's been growing for more than 2 decades. But to make these fantasy clothes feel real, they needed a secret weapon. And that weapon was a specialized, and let's be honest, often overlooked group of artists called the breakdown department. Their entire job is to take a brand new, pristine costume and make it look like it's been through the ringer, like it survived pirate battles, ocean storms, and years of adventure. You can just hear the passion in Diana Cilliers' words here. Her one instruction to this team over and over again was, make it look like her old favorite. And that is the secret ingredient. That's what turns a piece of fabric into a part of a character's story. It gives it history. Okay, so with this incredible philosophy guiding them, the team could finally start tackling the actual characters. And they did it with this amazing mix of obsessive research and really clever creative problem solving. Okay, take Marine Captain Smoker's jacket. To get that old favorite look, they didn't just use some fancy sprays or dyes. Nope, they went super low tech. They took this perfect white leather jacket, laid it on a pile of actual gravel, and literally just walked all over it. They were physically grinding that texture and history right into the fabric to make it feel authentic. Then you've got one of Zoro's outfits, which they pulled from a manga cover page. The challenge here was that the waistcoat wasn't just a pattern, it had a real texture to it. So what they do? They created a custom mold of faux crocodile skin, pressed the fabric into it to get the texture, and then hand-painted every single piece gold. It was like this insane puzzle, and they had to do it over and over for all the stunt doubles. But sometimes, the real world just has to win. In the manga, Nami climbs the freezing cold reverse mountain in a tank top. Yeah, right. They were filming in the middle of winter. So the solution was pretty simple. They added long sleeves so the actress, Emily Rudd, wouldn't freeze. And it was actually Rudd who pushed for it. She basically said, I will brave the cold in the miniskirt for the fans. No problem, just please give me some sleeves. And what about the most out there, completely absurd designs? Like Edgar's wig that's also a shotgun. This wasn't something one person could make. It was this massive team effort. The prosthetics team 3D printed the guts of it. The props department came in and wired it all up with LEDs and the actual firing mechanisms. And then the hair and makeup team had to come in and painstakingly wrap the entire thing in hair to create the final piece. Just wild. As the hair and makeup designer Amanda Ross McDonald says here, One Piece wasn't business as usual. It completely forced them to rethink how they do things. It pushed their craft to the limit and made them work together in ways they never had before, all to make the impossible possible.
So, after all that painstaking work, the innovation, the teamwork, the one question that really mattered was still hanging in the air. What would the fans think? How would this absolute labor of love be received by the very people they were trying to honor?
And the reaction was, for the most part, incredibly positive. People like @cornbread666 got it immediately. They could see the passion and the insane level of detail that was poured into every single piece. It was clear this wasn't just another cash grab adaptation. It was made by people who truly loved One Piece. And this comment from @TheLaughingPanda is just perfect. It proves that the team's obsession with things like the breakdown department totally paid off. The gravel on Smoker's jacket, the custom texture on Zoro's vest, the viewers noticed. They understood that it was that depth, that weathering, that lifted these outfits from looking like cosplay into being believable, real-world clothes. But, of course, you can't please everyone. Not everybody was on board. Some viewers, like @RuiG, had a very different opinion. For them, the costumes never quite escaped that cheap cosplay vibe. They argued that trying to be so faithful to the manga was actually a mistake that held it back.
And nothing captures the fan debate quite like the controversy over Nami's top. It's fascinating. On one side, you have fans who were like, I didn't even remember it was a tank top. This makes total sense. But on the other side, you had purists who felt it was a betrayal of the source material. It just goes to show how incredibly passionate and invested this fan base is in every single tiny detail. So when you look at the whole picture, the mission was never really about a perfect, literal, page-to-screen copy. It was always about finding a balance. The goal was to build a world you could almost touch, where clothes get dirty and worn out, but that still held on to that vibrant, impossible fantasy that makes One Piece so special. And all of this leaves us with a really interesting question, one that applies to pretty much any adaptation. When you're bringing art to life, what's the difference between a faithful adaptation and a creative improvement? Is adding sleeves to keep an actor from freezing a necessary compromise, a failure to be faithful? Or is it just a smart, practical choice? Where do you draw that line? For decades, let's be honest, live-action anime adaptations have been a graveyard of good intentions. So when Netflix announced they were making a series about the weirdest, most wonderful, and longest-running manga of all time, One Piece, well, you could feel the entire internet just collectively hold its breath. But then, it actually worked. It worked brilliantly. And today, we're going to look at one of the biggest reasons why: the incredible, almost fanatically detailed costumes that brought this unbelievable world to life.
You know, it all really boils down to one single question, this impossible tightrope that the production had to walk from day one. How in the world do you take characters and clothes that were specifically designed for the stylized, two-dimensional world of a manga panel and make them feel like tangible, believable things that real people wear in our three-dimensional world? See, this was about so much more than just sewing a few shirts. This was about translating an entire artistic language, a visual style that lives and breathes on the page. And the challenge was just monumental, because the problem was baked right into the source material itself. This quote right here, it gets to the absolute heart of the problem. Ichiro Oda, the genius creator of One Piece, he drew these characters for one thing: maximum impact on a flat page. He wasn't thinking about physics, he wasn't thinking about practicality, he was thinking, how do I make this image dynamic, unforgettable? These designs were always art first and clothing second. And this slide, it lays out that core conflict perfectly. In a manga, right, a jacket can flow in this completely impossible way just for dramatic effect. But in reality, that same jacket has to work with stunt harnesses. It needs to be tough enough for brutal action sequences. And most importantly, it has to let the actor actually move and perform. You're literally translating from a world with no physics to one that is completely governed by them.
So, what was the solution? How did they tackle this?
Well, it wasn't about just diving in and cutting fabric. No, before a single stitch was ever made, the team developed this incredibly powerful philosophy, a set of guiding principles that would inform every single decision, from a captain's coat all the way down to a background villager's hat.
First off, they went deeper than maybe any adaptation has ever gone before. They didn't just look at the black and white manga panels that tell the story. No, they became obsessed with Oda's color walks. Now, if you don't know, these are special full-color art spreads he releases. It's the kind of deep-cut source material that showed a level of dedication that right away got the hardcore fans on their side.
And from that deep dive, they built their entire approach on 4 core pillars. Think of them as their 4 commandments. First, and this was crucial, stick to the manga, the original source, not the anime adaptation. Second, texture is everything. Use real-world materials to give every single piece a sense of weight, of history. Third, lean into the wonderful, beautiful chaos of One Piece's world. And finally, never, ever forget the actor. These clothes had to be practical enough for real people to fight, run, and perform in.
I love this quote from the design team because it just perfectly captures that third principle. The world of One Piece isn't one thing, it's everything, all at once. I mean, just think about the Barati restaurant. You have chefs in classic French uniforms standing next to pirates in modern-looking Hawaiian shirts, next to Marines in 18th century naval gear, all in the same room. It's a 60s go-go dress next to a Victorian-era top hat, and somehow it all just works. It feels completely cohesive.
All right, so with that philosophy locked in, let's look at how they actually put it into practice. Because this is where the details make all the difference, and it's where you can really truly see the genius at work.
The team's attention to detail was, well, it was almost microscopic. Okay, get this. Take Sanji's look during the Little Garden arc. That entire outfit was pulled from a tiny, almost unnoticeable drawing of him on a super crowded manga chapter cover. We are literally talking about zooming in on just a few pixels to build an entire screen-used costume. I mean, that's not just dedication, that's obsession.
And here's a perfect example of where they didn't just copy, they elevated. The character Crocodile, he wears this very distinctive waistcoat. In the manga, it's just black and orange. Pretty simple. The costume team had this brilliant yet perfectly logical idea to actually mold the vest with the texture of real crocodile skin. It's a creative choice that adds this incredible layer to the character that you can just feel through the screen. But they also knew when to make smart, practical changes. So in the manga, Nami wears a vest during the reverse mountain sequence. The thing is, they were filming those scenes in the dead of winter. It was freezing. So to keep the actress, Emily Rudd, warm and safe, they added long sleeves. And what's so amazing is that Rudd herself insisted on keeping the original miniskirt, saying, no, this is for the fans. It was just this perfect compromise between being practical and being faithful.
And you know, clothes in the real world, they have a history to them. To give the costumes that lived-in feeling, the team had a whole breakdown department. For the Marine captain's smoker's jacket, they didn't just make it look old, they made it old. They literally threw it on gravel, walked all over it, and beat it up until it genuinely felt like something he had worn for years and years. And you have to understand, this wasn't just one department's success. It was a massive, beautiful collaboration. You had the props department figuring out a practical way for Smoker to carry all his signature cigars. You had hair and makeup working hand in hand with costumes to literally sculpt hats that could fit over these incredibly complex, structured wigs. And when they were stuck, they went right to the source. They asked Oda himself what inspired a character. And that's how they learned Miss Valentine was based on the 1960s model, Twigget. So after all of that incredible work, all that passion, all that detail, how is it received? The answer to that question would really determine if this massive, massive gamble had paid off. And overwhelmingly, the fans felt the love. Comments just like this one were everywhere. Viewers could see the passion. They could see the respect for the source material and the sheer, raw effort that was woven into every single thread on screen. They weren't just seeing costumes. They were seeing a deep, profound understanding of the world that they cared so much about. But of course, you know, it wasn't universal. For some people, the direct translation from a hyper-stylized manga just didn't quite work. Some critics felt the outfits looked a little too much like costumes and not enough like real clothing. They argued that the commitment to accuracy sometimes came at the expense of a more grounded believability.
But for the vast, vast majority, the show's success came down to this perfect, delicate balance. It was truly a masterclass in knowing when to be fanatically faithful, like pulling a design from 3 pixels on a cover, and when to be bravely creative, like adding crocodile texture to a vest or long sleeves for an actor's safety. They didn't just translate the drawing, they translated the soul. And really, that leaves us with the ultimate question for any adaptation, doesn't it? What is the true goal? Is it to create a perfect one-to-one replica of the source material, or is it to perfectly translate the feeling, the spirit, and the core ideas of that material into a brand new medium? I think One Piece has given us its answer.
If you enjoy this video, please like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell to the later update from my channel. Thank you for watching till the end, and see you in the next video.